how can we say things? How can we use our voices for good?
Great way to start the show, right? Good morning and welcome to Recipe for Success. I am going to cough again. I'm so sorry. So, we're going to start this off with an apology, a disclaimer. I'm not sure exactly how we want to frame it, but I'm a little fidgety this morning. I've just had a lot of things going on in my mind, a couple things that happened this morning, and so I'm now channeling my inner. I don't know if I have any Zen in me, but I'm going to pretend that I do. And we're going to just take it down several notches. But I'm so excited because I really get to talk to one of my favorite people today. You guys have probably heard of the song, All My Exes Live in Texas. Now, I'm not a country Western person, but I do know the name of that song. Well, for me, I can tell you it's a phenomenon, but some of my favorite people in this industry live in Texas. And today's guest is no exception. So today I have Jennifer Stanley with me. Jennifer is an accomplished compliance attorney specializing in unraveling the complexities of employer-sponsored health plans. Armed with an unparalleled ability to decipher legislation, rules, and regulations, she excels in providing expert guidance in a clear, practical, and actionable manner. Her relentless curiosity, sharp intellect, and unwavering integrity set her apart as a formidable force in the field. You can tell I just made that up right off the top of my head, can't you? Actually, I really wanted to do you justice on your intro because I think that describes you to a T. So I'd really like to start this off by letting you introduce yourself to the audience, tell us a little bit about yourself, your history, and how you were drawn to the very sexy field of employee benefits compliance.
Thank you. And thank you, Nancy. And I love that you're human. I love that you started off all flustered. That makes me feel more calm and relaxed. So job well done. Yes, I am from Odessa, Texas, West Texas. It's home of the Permian Basin and oil. We do not have any oil in our family. We're the ones. So I had to get a real job. Went to law school as a second career. And as I stumbled out of the bar into a boutique broker's office, and this was in 2013, he was looking for an attorney because of PPACA, the ACA was rolling out. He had a good sized book of employers that needed help. He needed help. I needed a job. It worked out fantastically. And so from the very beginning, I was, set up to succeed. It also helped that I got to say, I don't know. And that was the right answer because nobody did at the time. So that's how it became sexy. And that's how I, right time, right place, right people. And from there, it has just become a vast opportunity of success and meeting new people. So here I am. On your show.
I like that. So my question is, my follow-up question is, did you stumble out of the bar exam or the bar where they were serving beverages?
I don't know.
You don't have to answer, but I was curious about that. No, I'm just kidding. Okay, well, you definitely were at the right place in the right time because entering this industry around the time that the ACA was enacted changed a lot of things for a lot of people. And so many people didn't understand the changes that were happening. So what were some of the first things that you did when you started advising their clients around the 2010, 2014 era, let's call it that, because that's when it was passed in 2010, but nobody really understood it for a few years. So we'll give it that window.
Yes, it started rolling out in 13, 14. What I did, I read a lot, read thousands and thousands of pages, had to go back and read, what were things like prior to the signing of PPACA, prior to that March date, because all I knew is I was saying no. I didn't know what you were doing before, whether it was to the broker, to the employer, just knew I was saying no. So to finesse that, I had to understand what things were like prior to that. So I also had to take corporate marriage counseling because there was a way.
I love that term.
Because there is a way that you have to say no when you're in this business, right? And so understanding the personalities of the broker, producer, the team that's supporting the employer that is trying to offer benefits and wants to just do it right, but they don't know what to do. The HR department of one, wearer of hats of many, learning how to say those things in a way that was understandable to them. And then also being able to present like, listen, this is year one. It sounds scary. Penalties are not going to kick in on year one, right? Those are conversations that I had many times over. And it's very similar to the conversations that we have, 10, 11, 12 years later. So that was PPACA. And those were the first things that I learned to do. Learn to read and synthesize, and learn to talk to, whether you're HR or C-suite or a woman or a man. I just had to learn how to talk to people.
Yeah, I can appreciate that. Of course, I have a long and rich history in the benefits, same as you, David Mordo, if you're still watching. And I have seen a lot with legislation. As a matter of fact, just because I want to date myself and tell everybody exactly how old I am, the first year that I came into the benefits industry was when COBRA was passed. And I remember attending many seminars, because there's no such thing as a webinar back then. There was barely an internet back then, but I went to a lot of seminars, and there was just terror in the room among brokers and consultants and insurance executives that COBRA was going to destroy our industry, and how could we possibly survive? That's what happens when people don't understand, is they're afraid and they see it as a problem. Well, clearly COBRA is still, going strong to this day. It hasn't ruined anyone yet. It has provided a lifeline to many when they were in between jobs or in situations where that was the best option for them. I also remember when ACA was passed, and I apologize for not using the PPACA. For some reason, I just can't say that. It makes me want to laugh. But
Patient protection, Nancy. No,
I know what it is. I just don't like to say it. But I remember when it was passed, and I attended some of the meetings here in our state when states had the choice to decide, are we going to set up our own individual exchange, or are we going to participate in the federal program? I'm in a state that set up their own exchange. They tried to also extend it to the small group market. It was a complete and utter failure. But one of the things that I was afraid of at that time when it first passed is I was afraid that the individual and the small group market would go into a death spiral, as I like to call it, as a dumping ground for poor risk. I had seen that firsthand in my state in the individual market back in the earlier 80s. And we had a period of almost 2 years where an individual couldn't buy a policy, health insurance policy in our state, because all the carriers withdrew. They said, you can keep the policies you have, but we will take no new applications, because of some things that had happened similar to what was enacted in ACA. So our insurance commissioner at the time said, we're going to do away with pre-existing condition waiting periods. There's no health statements. There's no pre-existing conditions. There was no open enrollment. There was no guardrails on what she did. At least we have a few guardrails on ACA. And so I really believed that we were going to see a similar situation at the at the national level, that the small group and the individual market would start to spiral out of control. Unfortunately, I actually see that starting to happen now. It took a lot longer than I anticipated, but we are at a point where that is an issue. There was a lot that went into it that had to do with compliance, which of course is your bailiwick, around reporting, et cetera, making sure that we were meeting affordability guidelines, we were meeting minimum essential coverage, we were meeting probation period requirements, hourly requirements. All of that happened then. But then we had the Consolidated Appropriations Act. Let's talk about that.
Yes. Where do you want to start?
I don't know. You pick a spot, because It's really along the continuum. I think that
It is.
I believe the CAA really was a continuation of some of the intent that was put in back in 2010. And I
You're
think it
correct.
clicked. I
You're
think
correct. Absolutely. Some of the transparency provisions are from the ACA. So yes, that's right. And it has just the CAA of 2021 is a very powerful tool instead of regulations that are, it's a law that can be used to help employers if it's used properly. And that's the thing. So to my employer plan sponsors, I'm talking to you, you guys spend so much money on offering these benefits, right? It is the top second expenditure you have. The CAA gives you the power to ensure that those costs are reasonable, that your plan is operating the way you anticipated and you want it to, and to provide some checks and balances on everyone touching your plan. And so that's just one little section of the CAA. That's the transparency provisions. And we've got these other sections of making us smarter consumers, making us understand kind of almost how to shop. I think that was the desire with the HSA, right? The health savings account, right? We were all going to become smart shoppers and to use cash to pay for services, but we didn't have the tools to use. Now that we have the tools, I think people just still don't. Now we just don't know how to buy healthcare as a consumer. So there's a lot of things to unpack there. We can start with transparency.
Okay, let's start there.
Okay, what's the definition of transparency, Nancy?
Well, yeah, exactly.
Whatever.
For me, it's telling the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. But I have seen people twist their definition of transparency. Well, I told you that. They don't go. It's not deep enough.
Right. Okay. Right. So that is where we can go deeper, and we need to go deeper with the 4 horsemen of the CAA transparency regulations. I mean, we have the comp disclosures, service provider comp disclosures. That's everyone who is touching the plan, need to disclose the compensation, direct and indirect, that they are receiving. Okay, one of the hardest parts of a comp disclosure is knowing who is getting the money and are they affiliated. It is like a downstream, upstream type of thing. But the onus is really on the employer to understand what comp is going where. And the only way for an employer plan sponsor to do that is to ask questions, to be curious. It is your money. So why not ask questions and then if the answer is given but it's not clear, why aren't you asking for clarity? It really can be that simple. It can be, are you stating any types of conflicts of interest? We talk about consolidation, mergers and acquisitions, and yet nobody's actually telling anyone that there is a conflict of interest here. Conflicts of interest aren't bad per se. They just need to be disclosed so that can go in to evaluate that reasonableness of the compensation that's being provided. That's
okay,
one.
Can we take a timeout right there? Because then we'll go to the next one. But I want to touch on that one because I think this is the one that people least understand about conflicts of interest. Again, like you say, if there's affiliations or associations, it doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad thing. But one thing that I mean, unfortunately, so many people in this country do not understand it. And this includes consultants, employers, et cetera. But if your insurance company also owns your PBM or vice versa, you've got a problem. And the reason you have a problem is because they're paying themselves out of this bucket and putting the money over here. They don't have the same restrictions in the PBM bucket that they have on the health plan bucket. They have to meet their minimum loss ratios, their MLR ratios. So sometimes it behooves them to not get the best deal on prescriptions because they can put that money over here and they can say, oh, look at all this money we spent. We're going to need to have a 15% rate increase because look at how much we spent on prescriptions. Well, who'd you pay that money to?
Right, themselves.
And again, it doesn't mean it's bad on the surface. I'm not saying that all such arrangements are a bad thing. It does mean that you need to understand it and you need to understand the implications to your plan.
Absolutely. And that's all we're asking employers to do when we talk about the F word of the fiduciary standard. And that's the trendy, I think transparency was trendy last year, fiduciary is trendy this year. The lawsuits are making it much more sexy. But it all comes down to the employer plan sponsor. Are they acting in the sole interest of their plan participants? And to do that, there are so many things that means you have to peel back. And here's the problem. One of them, there are many, but one is an employer's trying to make widgets. They are trying to do their job, right? They're also trying to offer a benefit that the government or their employees says they have to offer to keep employees. So maybe they're not the ones to do it. And if they're not a prudent person, they're definitely not the person to do it, right? Because they've got to have this level of expertise when it comes to being the fiduciary. So those are things that we see and we saw in the retirement space. I don't speak 401k, but I know that it's the crystal ball of that. And so having the not outsourcing completely, but putting in parameters and documentation and processes of showing that you, employer, are providing these services. You are monitoring your service providers. You're monitoring Nancy, right? I mean, we all need to be monitored, and demonstrating that that's happening. Then the outcome, regardless of what it is at least now defensible, which is really, we're just trying to protect the plan and the plan sponsor at the end of the day. Again, these are powerful tools if they're used properly.
Okay, so you mentioned the 4 horsemen and we talked about transparency. So let's tackle the next one.
Okay, so we have gag clause disclosure. That's a big one. And I'm interested because you're in a different, right? You're a producer. You see things I don't see. So last year around the fall, started getting emails of gag clause attestation, gag clause compliance, and it was from carriers, TPAs, PBMs, right? Everyone's saying, we are compliant. We are not gagging you, employer. Sign here and let us file for you, or we won't file for you, but you can go ahead and attest on your own behalf that we aren't gagging you. We don't have anything in our contracts that would prevent you from seeing very specific plan level information on cost and quality and network agreements. And you know how many people signed and attested to the government that they are free to negotiate and contract and see their plan data? Too many. You and I had the privilege of working together, and we were able to actually review the contracts, and we were able to amend those, right? The provider, once we brought it to their attention, they had to take it under advisement, talk to legal, and then more often than not, they sent an amendment saying, oh yeah, by the way, strike this, right? Great. Now we can make an attestation that we are compliant for this specific service provider. I filed so many complaints, many of them anonymous, because I think the employers are scared to put their names on the complaint for fear of retaliation. These are not public disclosures, but it does help the agencies understand that these clauses do exist, that there is not necessarily negotiation power that is intended when it comes to this prohibition on contracts and those restrictive clauses. It doesn't exist. But what you are supposed to do is read your agreement before entering into it. Document anywhere where it says audit. What is an audit? I mean, that's not a term of art. Define it. I don't want to audit your claims. I just want to see my claims. That's something that's not often provided, which is sad, especially when the employer, it's their plan, especially on the self-insured side. Just so many opportunities to use that and to use it wisely. But if you don't use it, employer, then you're abdicating this responsibility, and that's not good. That's a fiduciary breach. I mean, it now is what it is, and it is a fiduciary. It's a fiduciary breach.
So what percentage of employer-sponsored health plans do you think actually filed? I'm really curious about that. Do you have any
Filed
idea?
complaints or filed?
No. Filed their attestations.
I mean, high 90s.
You think
I
filed?
don't know if filed attestations that they were compliant. I mean, I have a very small swath of employers with whom I work and brokers with whom I work.
No, I just was curious if you had any information.
In my own book, I filed less than 10 attestations. The rest were complaints. I talked to the agency a lot over the Christmas break.
So let's talk about fully insured employers, because they're the ones with the least control.
Correct.
And they're the ones that are supposed to file and say there's no gag clauses, or in many cases, the employer or the insurance companies reached out and said, "Oh, we'll file on your behalf."
Mm-hmm.
It's completely not true. Those plans are so gagged, it's not even funny. So how are they allowed to file that there's no restriction?
So this is where I think the agencies level, there's like, they're staffed by humans, right? Understaffed, underpaid, overworked. This is where I think they missed an opportunity to clarify in the regulations to whom this applies. So they did say it applies to plan sponsors. The statute says it applies to plans. Well, the plan in a traditional ERISA sense is like that legal entity that houses the information, right? The benefits, the numbers. On the fully insured side, the plan, right? The plan's actually governed by the state, right? I mean, so they're renting it. Fully insured plan sponsors are renting their fully insured plan from the carrier, and the carrier has to follow those state laws and benefits and mandates and things. So to me, this one missed the boat. They added a level of confusion by making the plan sponsors attest. To me, it should not have been the plan sponsors of all plans. It should have been just the plan itself. Let the plan itself attest, and that would have solved the problem. That would have meant that carriers on the fully insured side can file. That would have meant that the employer plan, the entity of the self-insured level funded plan, would have been able to file on its own. I also think the regulators are missing the point and undermining this when it comes to, again, letting the employer delegate that responsibility to. Yeah,
that's kind of what that's where I was going with that, is because it's very confusing. It's very confusing in a lot of people. Okay, so we've got transparency. We've got no gag clauses. Who's our third horseman?
We have MAPIA, mental health, right? And get ready for some new regulations, final rules to come down on that one. Mental health is an interesting one because it's not new. What's new is like showing your homework. Okay, so this, the common theme is who's watching the hen house, you're allowing the fox to submit their own attestations. You're letting the fox tell the employer that no, all good here, look away. Same thing on the mental health. The TPA in particular is they're grading their own paper. They are saying, we are great, we are on par, see, look at this document, it's all right here. To me, that is not good enough, right? I will make 100 every day if I'm grading my own paper. But that's not what we want. We need checks and balances, and we need oversight. And also we need to know what's going on inside the plan. And this is where there is, again, such great opportunity, because even if the plan is written perfectly, right, written with the greatest care when it comes to the quantitative limitations and the qualitative, how are things working behind the curtain, the only way to know what's going on behind the curtain is to go behind the curtain. And you do that by being in the plan and watching and monitoring the appeals processes, the denials, all of those things, and seeing if it's operating in parity. And we offer a service, literally doctors on the plan, attorneys on the plan, for an entire year, making corrective action recommendations, so that, again, the employer can do their widget making, the TPA can stay in their lane, process claims, the way the plan document is written, and an unbiased, properly compensated, not overcompensated, but a properly and reasonably compensated team can see what's going on the inside of that plan and help make improvements to that plan.
And it's not a one and done thing. It's an ongoing process, because we've been doing this for our self-funded clients for a number of years, and every year they come back. I mean, they reviewed it last year. We updated the plan documents to do everything they suggested, and then they come back this year, and there's a whole nother laundry list of suggestions that we need to take into consideration. That's not even touching on what you're
right. And so you're saying, in your own experience, that you haven't gotten 100 every year.
No.
You're not making a straight A. And that's okay, because we know that, because we are also consumers of a plan.
But right? we can show documentation that says every year we've reviewed it, and every year we've taken action to make it as compliant as possible.
And that's what the agencies want to see. They want to see that that the employer plan sponsor, they're doing what they can to the extent that they can, right? And that is very reasonable. They expect to see things that need to be addressed each year. That's what they expect. Same on, no, I'm not going to do that. So I'm going to jump totally to HIPAA, but we're not there. So keep me focused, Nancy.
Okay, horseman number 4. Tell me who we've got.
Number 4, RxDC. So RxDC, right? Just this one, again, so powerful. If the employer plan sponsor does this at the plan level, and I will say in the compliance space, there are several TPAs, and I know they were backed by compliance-minded people and companies, and they did, I don't know what the right word is, they encouraged the TPA to communicate to their clients that they wanted to do this on the plan level. We did the same with the TPAs and PBMs with whom I work. We will do this on the plan level. It's a pain in the ass. Can I say that?
Yes, you can.
Thank you.
Yes.
We will do this at the plan level if you want us to, and so that you can see your plan's data. Because it's not just prescription, so much information on the prescription. It's also claims data. And so you know what you need to have to do that? You need to have all of your claims. And it needs to have all the right numbers and figures. And so that one is having more movement in the right direction. Now, I don't know if those filings and those results were given to the employers. I don't know if they understand what it's about, but point is, there are people in our space that are planting seeds and watering them. So hopefully that will become something that employers realize is it's not an inconvenience. It's actually, even at the cost, It's a very small amount to get really good insight into the prescriptions that are written. I was able to see some prescriptions that were written. I was like, wait a minute, this is not covered under the plan. Why is it showing up on this RxDC report, right? I ran into that. That was not something I expected to see, but it's something that ended up, the employer got some money back. That was nice. But it was only because they were working with people who pushed to have the RxDC done at the plan level. This is again the agencies, man. I mean, I'm sorry. They're nice. They're nice people. On the phone with them, and they want cleaner data, and they think if the TPAs and PBMs are submitting the data that it will be cleaner. I think that undermines the purpose of it. They are supposed to come out with reports 6 months, 18 months after each year's filings. I have not seen a report yet because the data sucks, I'm sure. And it sucks because the plan isn't able to see what is being submitted on their behalf, or they might question it, right? But because it's all aggregated and secret, all they want to know is that it was done without confirmation that it was actually done.
All of these are fantastic tools. I think we can all agree on that. And anybody that's listening would probably nod their head and say they're great tools in the hands of somebody that understands how they can be leveraged to maximize the plan, build a better plan. But we're getting into a point of overwhelm for a lot of employers because so much reporting now is required. I mean, if you're a self-funded large employer, you've got 5,500, you've got 1095s, you've got mental health parity, you've got RxDC, you have no gag clauses. It's just continues to grow to the point where so many of them are like, should we just go back to fully insured? Because this is getting to be a nightmare. It seems that, of course, this is government, so we know it's not going to be logical, but it seems that there should be a way to tie this together and not have so many separate responsibilities. And it's like, but I already did that. Nope, that was a different report. That was a different testing that you had to do.
So that's really interesting. And I think in doing my research and just letting my brain go, I'm not even going to tell you how it goes, but in the playground of landmine and dynamite that does exist up there, I think the gag clause, or not gag clause, I think the comp disclosure is an offshoot of a 5,500 requirement, right? 5,500s, the agencies had an opportunity to bring that requirement way down on the thresholds. I think and we brokers, we just were like, no, you're not going to do that to our small employers. Heart's in the right place, right? But what is, and I think there was even some things on like only certain entities have to disclose the compensation, right? So one, our hearts were in the right place when we were saying, no, like don't do that to our small employers. But the consequence of that is a lot of our small employers have gone into this level funded self-insured space. They only get the schedules that their broker asks on their behalf. They aren't necessarily complete. They don't always make sense. Who knows, but it's a check the box done. So with that, I think the reporting it sucks, but it doesn't have to. It can be a very reasonable cost, an upfront cost or an ongoing cost, so that it's not a held hostage affair, right? And I think that's where people in our space, in the compliance space, say, oh no, you have to do this and the cost is X, 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 whatever it is, right? And it's like, so the employer is panicking and they're paying a premium, not in this, the premium, they're paying what feels like a high dollar amount because it has to be done and it has to be done tomorrow. What if instead it was planned and it was budgeted in a way that made sense? And so it wasn't a one and done, but it was a full compliance solution that addressed all these different areas under one roof with one point of contact. And if they mess up, you get to fire them, right? And they get to stand on their own and rise and fall on their own, but also just really help every party stay in their
Yeah.
own lane.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like I was telling my clients for the last few years, oh, that's another $4,000. That's another $5,000, but we can get this one done for five. It felt
It's
like it was snowballing. And because there's so much, the widget makers aren't looking at it. They're like, okay, well, we want to be compliant. So let's just get it done. But they're not looking at a thing.
right.
They're like, that's a line item expense. We don't have time to deal with this information because we don't know what to do with it.
Right.
We're a widget maker.
That's what I think the partnership comes in, finding the solutions and the tools. The tools are just a tool, right? I mean, tools are lying around the house, not doing anything because they're lying around the house. You need the team to pick up the tools, do the work, make it make sense, action items that are bite-sized and reasonable, and then delegate those responsibilities. And that's the other thing with the fiduciary is they don't have to have it all to themselves. I mean, if they don't delegate, then it is all to themselves. But they can specifically delegate different responsibilities and name those other entities as these parties are fiduciary for these services. I work with a couple of PBMs, and they will take on fiduciary responsibility for the things that are under their control. That is awesome, right? Delegated. So they can do that. I don't think a broker would want to be delegated a fiduciary responsibility, right? If you're a consultant, you can only work with the information you have, right? And we know that some of that information you find out through conversation, and sometimes you're like, I'm sorry, what? Right? So those are the things where having a dedicated fiduciary part of a team can help offload some of that. At the end of the day, it is that decision of, do we offer this plan? What are the fixed costs? So build in this compliance, fiduciary benchmarking, build those things in to your budget as a fixed cost, not a PEPM cost, fixed cost. Because again, I don't care how many employees are on the plan. Irrelevant to me as compliance. I don't care.
You have to do the same amount of work.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So missing the boat if I think I'm only dealing with a 20 life group that has really poor participation. Okay, so that's where that more comprehensive, holistic approach works. It works well. It's budgetable. But then there's also that return on investment. I think that would just be remarkable because now you get to have just another person, right? You've got the broker that's putting together these cost containment solutions. Great. But the broker is also trying to broker other business too, right? So let that be, again, a team approach on some of this with those good relationships. I really think employers can move the needle on their own merit and with their own power, because they have the power. They just don't understand what that means.
One of the things that I think is special about what you do is you basically offer a compliance suite, for lack of a better term. So they can take it a la carte, but they can get it all in one package. And the reason that I bring this up is because as an employer, a small employer, I had a 401k with a insurance company for years and years and years and years. It was easy to use. I had no worries. It performed well. But the advisor that had been my advisor on that for years left that and went to a different program. And he convinced me that I should move my 401k. So because he was my advisor, I trusted him. I read through the documents. I thought that I understood what I was reading. However, it turned out that I was in a MIWA, and there was 17 different parties involved in this, and everybody was asking me different things. And I was so overwhelmed that I got frustrated. I mean, I still had it, which ended up being the wrong decision, because now that I have sold my business, I can't get my 401k out. I can't roll my own funds out because of restrictions they put on me and that I must have not understood. So we're having to jump through all of these legal hoops to roll my plan out as a single entity plan. So therefore, I can transfer my own money to my new 401k plan. So the only reason I bring this up is because I consider myself to be a pretty detail oriented person. I pay attention to what I'm doing. I don't make decisions lightly. I don't I may not read every letter of fine print, but I do pay attention to the details. And I found myself in that situation. So that tells me that others, whether it be 401k or benefits, can potentially find themselves in that situation as well if they're not partnered with the right people. So partnering with a consultant who could talk to you about those things, as well as a compliance service that can provide you the insight and the actionable information and talk to you in plain English so you can avoid those pitfalls, I think is really important.
Well, and for the service, but it's also a solution
Yes.
because I do know that problems are going to come up, right?
Right.
And so it's what I did learn from my first broker out in West Texas is you never present a problem without multiple solutions, or at least one. But it better be a really good one, and you better search high and low for other possibilities, right? So it's a solution because it allows that access and availability and accountability to the compliance suite. And I do like how you call that. But honestly, I know my brain, and I try doing standalone services because I understand that, again, everything's kind of piecemeal together with other vendors, or, this one already offers it. Nancy, I don't know how to stay in my lane. All right. I just don't. And so
that's why I like you so much.
It is easier for me to just be able to talk and ask questions and then realize that, oh, wow, this led to this. So that's why I'm now going to suggest we do this. And yes, I mean, maybe they're paying for it twice now, but not really, because if it was fixed, I wouldn't have needed to solve a problem. So
okay.
That's good.
Well, I have, obviously we could talk for hours, but in the interest of time, I have one more topic I want to address before we move on to the fun part of the show. And that is, again, I'm pretty sure I'm a Texan at heart, even though I don't physically live there, but Texas bill, House Bill 2002. Let's talk about that for a minute, because I want that. I want that in my state. I want that nationally. I was a little bit surprised when I did a post about it back in May, and people in Texas are reaching out to me like, well, what's that? I'm like, what do you mean? What's that? This is the most exciting thing I've seen in a long time.
Right. So House Bill 2002 was passed. Texas meets every other year. So it was passed in legislature last year, 23. And what it does is it only applies to fully insured plans and only PPOs. So if an individual is in a PPO regulated by Texas, Blue Cross Blue Shield of Texas, right, for example, then if they have a service that is covered under their plan, and they go to a provider or a physician or a facility that's out of network and pay cash, then they can submit that receipt and have that cash amount applied to their deductible and their out of pocket. So it allows for and there's a couple little nuances there, but I love it too, but now we're also back to where we started an hour ago with hoping that employers or people would be good consumers of healthcare services. And I just don't think we are, but maybe this at least is one more opportunity for us to ask what the cash price is. But I will tell you this, true story. My daughter had to go to urgent care a few weeks ago. My husband took her. He signed a paper that said this will be submitted to insurance. And some other stuff. It did turn into an ER visit. It should not have. But all that to say is he signed a paper because it was presented to him, right? And I don't know if I would have signed the paper or not. I mean, I love being able to just be like, oh, why did you sign that? But you sign things because they're put in front of you, and you're signing when you walk in, about your insurance. And so there are just ways that we need to be able to say, wait, hold on, I'm not signing anything until I read it. I'm going to shop and we'll see. But there is a huge opportunity for people to pay cash, negotiate a cash price, and have it go towards their deductible and their out of pocket, instead of relying on the insurer carrier to do that for them.
Okay, so I love that example you just gave. I will say that one of the issues is most of the time people aren't even getting a piece of paper. They're literally they're pushing over that little signature pad and saying, "We need you to sign here," without giving you anything to read or review. So
when I had my baby, the screen, you could sign the screen, but you could not see what it was you're signing. I'm like, I'm sorry, what am I signing here? I'm not signing anything. The crazy, but people do.
So one time I don't even remember what I was being seen for, but I said, can I see this? So they gave it to me. And of course I crossed out some things and, initialed it and wrote some stuff in there. And they said, well, we can't accept this. And I said, well, then I'm not going to sign it. And they said, well, then we won't see you. Okay. You cannot be seen if you do not accept our terms of engagement. And our terms of engagement are, we're going to charge you whatever we want. We're not going to tell you up front, and you're financially responsible for it.
Right.
That's the terms of engagement for our current healthcare system. And that is so wrong.
They should have to post, it should be like going to the grocery store, honestly. Yep. The famous opinion of the ACA, there's been a lot of ACA lawsuits, right? But one of the first ones was dealing with broccoli, and you know what the cost of broccoli is. So that's where you're right. That's where the transparency stuff started, is what is the cost of broccoli? You know that, why don't you know the cost of anything else? And that's a disservice. But people, especially in Texas, and I think there are other ones, there are so many tools. I don't make any money off of anyone. Billy probably doesn't even know who I am. But isn't there like this Billy thing?
Yeah, Billy, it's only for hospital services, but there is an app. But I think that we managed to circle back to the original problem that you brought up, is that the original intent of ACA, of CAA, was to make things more transparent, but we're focused on the wrong things that we're making transparent. What we need to know is how much it costs. How much does it cost for a regular doctor visit? So like you say, yes, that should be on the wall. Here's our standard costs, so that somebody at least has an idea of what they're dealing with. So we're following through with the idea of transparency, but we're making things transparent that people don't understand.
Right.
They understand they understand the impact of knowing how much it costs to go to the doctor or to have a surgery or whatever the case may be. But they don't. So again, just a personal experience is I had a hip surgery last year in December. Now they wanted to tell me how much it was going to cost me, but they didn't want to tell me how much it was going to cost. And I asked, I said, well, what's the total cost? Oh, we can't tell you that. I said, then why can you tell me what you think it's going to cost me and ask for my money up front? I said, I won't give it to you. I said, I'll give you $100. I said, to show that I will pay. I said, but I'm not going to pay it right now.
And that's, so we haven't talked about like the advanced explanation of benefits, how I'd like to understand my post explanation of benefits. Those things aren't useful. They don't give any, they don't. And then being on this side and working with different TPs, honestly, Nancy, I did not realize how long it takes to process a claim. And if you read contracts, which you should, you employer, is some of those agreements that you're signing or that you are joined to that you can't sign because you can't even see that they exist. That, by the way, that is called a gag clause. Then you don't know that the provider might have 365 days to file. Now, why is that? Texas, fully insured side or a hospital, they have prompt pay rules. They get 90 days or 45 days. I think it doesn't matter. It shouldn't take a year. So then you have a year for the provider to file. So how are you supposed to, then you don't know what your responsibility is until that claim hits and the math is done and you hope the math is right. It's a mess. So to your point, why do we not just have a menu of services?
Yeah.
I mean, isn't it for a doctor that has more credentials or better Yelp ratings? Who knows, right? What the level is there, but it is a mess and it doesn't have to be.
But don't you think it's interesting that we can go to the dentist and they can get a predetermination of benefits and they'll tell you exactly how much the insurance company is going to pay and how much you're going to be responsible for? And that happens within 24 hours. But we can't do the same thing with medical. I just find that to be interesting. Well, in the interest of time, I'm going to move on and wrap this up. I have a feeling that this is going to call for a revisit. We're probably going to have you back on the show early next season too, because I got through like half of my questions because this is just, to me, it's honestly, we could talk compliance for weeks and weeks and weeks. There's just so much to cover. And it's fascinating to me. And I love to talk to somebody like you that can talk about it in, plain English in ways that most people can understand. So thank you for that.
Absolutely.
All righty. Are you ready to have some fun?
Nancy, I'm not fun.
Okay, you're fun. We're going to be fun today. I'm going to bring it out of you. I'm going to bring the fun out. I hear kids in the background. They can contribute to the fun if we need to.
That's
all right. So what's your absolute favorite food in the world and can you cook it?
Sashimi, and I don't have to.
Cop out. Not really. That's an excellent choice. All right. What character trait do you admire most in other people and why?
I think the ability to listen and empathize together.
Okay.
And
so
why?
It's kind of self-explanatory.
Okay, thank you.
So I'm good. So if I flip that back on you and I say, what's the character trait in yourself you're most proud of and why?
Oh. Okay, it's not empathy. I had to learn lessons in compassion. Actually, I empathize really well. But I was not born with compassion. So I have to experience the pain to be able to demonstrate compassion, which means I actually empathize. So that's a mess. But for me, I think it's my work ethic would be the trait, but that can also be a sword and a shield. I don't know. It's a tough one.
You're going to have to spend some more time. You don't have to answer it right now, but you need to spend some more time thinking about that because you have a lot of amazing qualities and traits. You just need to acknowledge them. Okay. So what's one thing any employer can do to better understand their compliance requirements?
They need to partner with a team that can help them understand their compliance requirements. A team.
Okay. I like that. All right. What is either your secret talent or something people would be surprised to learn about you?
I'm funny. I am. See? There.
You're funny.
I know.
That was hilarious.
Funny. Thank you.
All right. Last question. Who is the one person, famous or otherwise, living or not, that you would most love to sit down and have a cup of coffee with in a conversation, and why?
Oh, y'all are I don't know if I'm gonna, it doesn't matter. I would love to sit down with Trump. I've loved Trump since the first time I heard him, which was actually late to the party. So he cracks me up. He's succinct and arrogant and New York. But he can't be dumb. I'm sorry. He's not dumb. And so to me, that would just be a fun cup of coffee.
Well, it would be interesting. That's for sure.
Would be interesting.
You would not be bored.
And I would hear all about the greatest and the most fantastic and the best ever, whatever.
Yep.
And So
That would be great. I love that answer. That's a good one. No one's answered that before, so I love it.
they're probably
Excellent.
scared. I'm like, oh, don't know.
No, I'm glad you said that. All right. So if people want to learn more about the services that you provide, what would be the best way for them to get in touch with you or to learn more?
Yeah, you can go to Stanley Cup with a K.com. Follow on LinkedIn, Fiduciary Benefits Advisors. That's that team approach. If we're looking beyond compliance and want to really get in and delegate, then I would suggest the Fiduciary Benefits Advisors. We have discovery process, just to, again, take the temperature of where our employers, plan sponsors are and meeting their fiduciary obligation. So at the end of the day, if they are sponsoring a plan and they are in the private sector space, they are a fiduciary. I mean, it is what it is. So let's figure out where they are through a series of yes/no questions and get to work through a delegated team approach.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining me today and putting up with my foibles in the beginning. We made it through. It was a great conversation, and I always enjoy talking to you. So thanks so much. And everyone else, I will see you next week.
Thank you.